So next up, I'd like to introduce Mick McGrath, the Director of DevOps for Batovi. He is going to continue his series on Docker and show us how to publish Docker images so that they're available outside of your local machine.
This is, like Jason said, picking up from what we've done before, which is take the Done.js place my order application and wrap it in Docker and set it up for working locally with Docker Compose. And so all of that is outlined in the place my order repo in a branch called introduce Docker with the docker.md file. Kind of walks through all of what was in the previous talks. And so what's involved with this one is, now what do we do with it? We want to get it somewhere that can be deployable or pullable from some sort of a container orchestrator like Kubernetes or something. And so to do that, continuous integration is the auto way to do it. In order to do that, the best practice is to have some tests running. Place my order already has tests, so we're going to hook those up and put those into continuous integration, and then publish those Dockers, the Docker images to registry. And so the title of this, by the way, is called Artifactory, or has the term Artifactory in it. And that's just mostly referring to this project, which is from JFrog. It's Artifactory, which basically is just a place to store things, whether it's Debian packages, Docker images. I think I could do npm, just about anything. So Artifactory, in a generic sense, really just refers to where your deployable assets are stored. And so in this case, we're going to use Docker and a Docker image registry. So I'll get into that in a minute. But to go through this process, we need the prerequisites are Docker, and then we need an image registry of some kind. You can use Docker Hub. That's what we're going to use in this one. You can also use GitLab has one. GitHub has one now. You could use Artifactory. You could use Amazon Container Registry. Google's got their own. Like all the cloud providers have their own. So it's just pick one, and it's going to walk you through how to get your credentials and what the URLs are and stuff like that. All right, so what we want to be able to do is run the tests. And so the first thing that we really need to be able to run the tests, well, first of all, I tend to put it in a script just so that it's a single thing, like it's a shell script. Again, you see this / run the test, and I'll go into the contents of that in a minute. But having that succinct place to run the test is very useful in terms of portability. And so in order to run the test, what we're going to do is use Docker, because you use Docker for everything. And to run these particular tests, this is a front-end web application. And so we need a browser. And the way to do that through Docker is to have this XVFB, which is a virtual frame buffer. So it's like a virtual screen. And we're going to use Chrome. And so there's a library called Chromium XVFB. And we're gonna use that as our base image. So this thing has Chrome and a virtual screen in it, and we will go through and install Node at the version that we need it. So side note, this actually does have specific Node-based images that are built on top of this base image. And so there is a XVFB-JS, and it just does not have version 10. Node version 10 available to it yet. And so basically I'm like building my own here, and you would want to basically take this out. If you're going to use this, you want to take this out and create a base image, or contact Mark Adams and have him do it for Node 10, because you don't want this to run every time. Like, I'm not actually going to run it during this talk because it would take too long to build that image separately. So you want to do that because it's not going to change. Create it as a base image and then use that, and then your Docker file will change to be only this. And just run npm install on our particular repository. All right, enough of that. And so now the script, this is all the script is just docker compose -f docker compose test.yaml and build. So essentially we're using Docker compose to run a build that is specific to this Docker file. So that that Docker compose YAML file is exactly the same as the regular Docker compose, which is what we use for just local development. And so these are actually the same thing. And the only thing that changes is for place my order, which is this repo, we are using a specified Docker file that has Chrome and the virtual screen in it, so that we can run the tests and have that the browser available. Okay, so now we have a script, and then we can run that. And so if we want to, once we have that, then we can run that locally. And so this is my running it. Again, I'm not going to actually do it because it'll take longer than we have to sit here and be patient with me. But you can see that what this one is doing, just run Docker test. It's setting up place my order API so that the API is available in case the front end needs the API. And then it's doing the place my order piece. You can see it's pulling in the XVFB, running npm install done.js. There's a lot of output here, some errors probably related to the npm install that don't have really any effect on npm, but none of that's relevant. Really, the main thing is like, okay, npm's done, and now we can actually run our tests. And so now testy can run the UI tests in a browser using Chrome, and we get all okay. And so if this stuff here were to fail, then we can set up our CI pipeline runner to fail the job and to stop everything because the tests need to be fixed. Cool. So now we have our tests up and running. Then we want, once the tests run, we would want to publish those tests. In order to publish, again, you need access to some sort of image registry. And then at some point, we're going to hook it up to a pipeline runner. And by pipeline runner, I mean something like Travis CI or Circle CI or GitLab or something that can just you can configure a set of steps to run scripts in a set of steps and use that as your CI pipeline. Jenkins, anything that you can think of that does that sort of thing. We're going to use Travis for this. And so again, I like to put everything in just a simple script. So we create a script called Docker publish. And this is really all it does. Since we're using Travis, we've got a little bit of Travis flavor in here. This could be abstracted out a bit. And then all we need to do is log into Docker. This will by default be Docker Hub, because that's what Docker works with by default. If you have your own registry or a different registry, then you can follow the instructions there to actually do the login. But we'll have environment variables to do the actual username and password, and then set up where we're actually going to push it, tag it, and push it. That's all it does. And so this is the actual command here. All of this stuff is just set up, and all of this stuff can and probably should be parameterized. But just for the sake of visibility in this walkthrough, then I just put it here. For example, Travis has the name of the repo that it's connected to, so you wouldn't have to necessarily hard code it. You could just use what Travis gives you. Okay, so now we have a script to actually do the publishing, and now we just need to set that up, and we're going to do it in Travis. So this is what I meant by a pipeline runner. So Travis YAML is what is used to configure how Travis behaves whenever it gets new commits into the repository. And so what we've set up here is we have some jobs, and those jobs include a test. And here's the script. We can just call the one script. And then the next step is publish. And here's the publish script. And so as far as us telling Travis what to do, we just say whenever a new commit comes in, run the test and then run the publish. And Travis allows you to do parallel jobs and things like that too. And then we just need Docker because we're going to have to call Docker-based commands. So we need the Docker service running. So to see what that looks like, over here is our Travis. It's hooked up to place my order. I've got this in a separate repo right now for accessibility reasons, or permissions reasons rather. But anyway, so this is what is hooked up to the repo. And so essentially I made all of the changes and created all of these scripts and config files and things like that and pushed those up. And Travis is like, oh, I've got stuff to do. And so Travis will go through and run the tests. And so this is Travis basically running exactly this, what I showed in my local machine. And so now that we've got it hooked up in CI, we really never have to run that locally. We can let Travis do that for us. And so you can see this will This will go down, do all the installation, all of the output is the same, and here are tests that actually ran inside of Docker with Chrome. So that piece passed, all good, tests are good to go. Now we want to publish it. And so publishing, it just runs through the same thing. And here, I think above all this, it actually does a build. So you'll see the build happen for the Docker image. And yeah, so login succeeded. This is where we logged into Docker Hub. And then it's building the container, it's pushing to place my order latest, doing the build and doing the push, and all of that succeeded. So when all that's done, you can hop over to Docker Hub to what we specified, or your, whatever registry you're using, and we can see it pushed the latest. So a quick note, I did not do any fancy, all I'm doing is tagging it latest. There are lots of strategies around like how you name the tags and different reasons for different conventions and things like that. Again, a lot of that can be parameterized. I just use latest just so that you can see it, and didn't want to get into the nuance of how to do different conventions during this talk. So a couple of things to note. One is a lot of image registries will have their own pipeline runners in some form or fashion. Docker Hub, for example, has a way to link to GitHub, and on commits will build the images. I tend to not do it that way because I don't know that Docker Hub allows you to run arbitrary scripts, and we want our tests to pass before this happens, before the image is created, because ideally images that are created and published to an image registry are all deployable up through production. Like that's the goal, is your artifacts are deployable things. So anyway, I tend to do it like this, where I just have a couple of scripts, and then we can put that in really any pipeline runner you want. So if you have a pipeline runner that can run Docker-based commands, then you can put your test scripts in Docker, and then you're not constrained in any way to a pipeline runner. You can move it wherever you want to, and this pattern will still work. One other thing to note is I want to point out like kind of how GitHub, or just like point out like another Artifactory. And so GitHub now has this GitHub packages. And so if you look at type Docker, GitHub is going to tell you, look, here's your login stuff. And then here's how to actually do the tag and the push. And so this is basically, you would want to drop this in your script and modify it appropriately instead. And then we would be pushing to GitHub instead of Docker Hub. And the other thing is GitHub has a pipeline runner with GitHub Actions. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's worth taking a look at, because you can have Docker actions, Docker-based actions. So in here somewhere, it's probably closer to the top, Docker build I see the Docker push, but I wanted the Docker build. Anyway, not that important. So we can have a workflow inside of GitHub Actions. And so this is inside of a .github workflows. And this will go through and do a Docker build. Is it doing a Docker build? Yeah, so this is like running some tests and doing a Docker push where it does the build and push. And so you can use GitHub itself instead of Travis, or again, any pipeline runner, whatever your organization is using. This pattern works again with pretty much any pipeline runner and any image registry. So now when you're done with this, you'll have continuous integration set up with tests running, and your artifacts being published to Docker Hub, and then you can start pulling it into like Elastic Container Registry or Kubernetes or whatever it is that you're using to orchestrate your containers. And that is the end of my talk. Are there any questions?
Have you used GitHub Actions much? Have you put it through its paces yet?
Not yet, no. I have not. I've tinkered around with it here and there, but I haven't had it's so new that organizations aren't fully on board using it yet. Most of the clients that we work with already have had a need to automate their CI/CD pipelines. And so they have tools already in place that they're using, that they've got infrastructure around and things like that. And so I think it's a good spot. A good place to test it is more like an open source tooling and things like that don't necessarily have or need or like needed the the pipeline tooling prior to this. I think it's got a lot of potential. I haven't really messed too much with the nuances. A lot of people are using GitLab too, which kind of like beat GitHub to the punch with its own Artifactory and pipeline runner and stuff. But yeah, I haven't played around with it. I'd like to though. If anybody has played around with it and or used it in a real setting, hop over to the Bitovi community, to the DevOps channel, and let us know what your thoughts are about it, because I'm definitely curious.